The German Barbarian returns with another talk, and today, very fittingly for the topic of this talk, I am outside, and more importantly, I am on the ground. Because, as I kind of teased slash promised about a week and a half ago, I'm going to talk about the benefits of spending time on the floor slash ground. As I mentioned in that Instagram story, I've recently been spending quite a lot of time on the ground, sitting to, work on stuff, but also sleeping on the ground, relaxing on the ground, eating, having my meals while I'm hanging out on the ground. I've just been spending a lot of time sitting on my floor and also on the ground outside. However, before I get into the specifics of what this video is all about, why you should spend time on the ground, what the benefits of that might be, I think it's important to note that this is not some recent fad that I have gotten into like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and now I'm super amped about it and I want to tell you guys about it. But it's just some random thing that I stumbled into, if you will. I have actually been spending time on the ground, not in the sense in which just about anyone spends time on the ground now and then, but more so in a more intentional fashion and for longer periods of time, since I was in my mid-teens, like 15, 16. I talked about this a little bit in the meditation video, but when I got into meditation, or around the time that I started researching things like the Wim Hof method and stuff of that nature, I also, for quite some time, would sleep on the ground 1 day a week. And this was a sort of stoicism, get connected with or appreciate the fact that you have a bed to sleep in type of thing. So the reasoning behind it was a little bit different, but even back then, I actually started to notice some benefits to sleeping on the ground. Specifically, as a teenager, I, for months, years, had struggled with back pain, specifically lower back pain. And I would get out of bed and feel like shit. I would actually get up out of bed after lying for hours on end, and my back would hurt. And I noticed that sleeping on the ground was uncomfortable for that one night I did it in a week. It wasn't comfortable, and I usually didn't sleep well, but my back actually felt great. Which sounds kind of weird to a lot of people, probably, because people generally associate the ground with discomfort. It's a hard surface. If we're talking about a wooden floor or a stone floor or what have you, it's generally pretty hard. And people associate something soft, a sofa, a bed, with comfort. And this is where we're getting into the first point, the first benefit I want to talk about when it comes to spending time on the ground. Because if you sit back for a moment and you think about what type of pressure something more or less hard pushing against your body, and no, that's not what I'm talking about, like, get your mind out of the gutter. What type of pressure of this sort is not only beneficial to my body, but is perhaps something you even associate with comfort, with a nice feeling? I am, of course, talking about massages. Massages are someone pushing into your muscle. If we're talking about the classic massage most people think of when we speak of a massage, right? Someone using their hands, their thumbs, maybe their knuckles, just in general their hands to push into your muscle, to knead your muscle, to kind of push it around, essentially. And at the end of the day, in some way, shape, or form, exact pressure on it with, again, the fingers, maybe the knuckles, but tools that are relatively hard. Like, the hands aren't super soft. I'm not talking about whether or not the skin is soft or smooth. Maybe it's more comfortable to get a massage from someone with smooth hands, but the hands themselves are relatively firm, right? They're not It's not like someone is pushing into you with like a big relaxed bicep or something, which would be relatively soft if it's not flexed. No, the fingers are fairly bony, they are firm. And a massage is, in some cases, very comfortable, even if a massage is a little rougher, if it's a little more intense, and it might not be super comfortable all of the time that you're getting the massage. Afterwards, usually you're going to feel very, very good. And the reason why is that pressure on the body can be extremely healthy. It's good for loosening up your muscles, it engages your fascia. So, spending time on the ground, getting that pressure from the ground just naturally by being on it, is a very beneficial thing. Because what people do when they sleep on a soft mattress is avoid natural pressure that you would get if you think of a human in a sort of natural environment as a hunter-gatherer, right, spending time out in the wilds. You are avoiding natural pressure that your back muscles, maybe if you sleep on your side, if you are turning around, you're spending some time on your stomach, you're spending some time on your back. You're avoiding this pressure that all of these muscles would get. Your shoulders, your back muscles, of course your glutes, right, and your legs as well. They are spending all of that time on the ground, and you are not getting all of that. You are avoiding it when you're sleeping on a soft mattress. Whereas when you're sleeping on the ground, you actually get all of this pressure. You naturally toss and turn a little bit, meaning that you change positions while you sleep, and you are essentially getting a sort of full body massage just by interacting with the hard floor. And in case you're thinking, isn't that super cold, or isn't it just weird to lie on like a hardwood floor? That's not actually what I do. I try to kind of simulate a softer surface that would be more natural, something like grass or moss, by just rolling out my yoga mat, and then I put a relatively thin but warm woolen blanket over it to kind of increase the insulation a little bit. So that way I am not getting sick by sleeping on the cold ground, but it's still a very thin layer. It's relatively hard. It's more or less like sleeping on the ground outside with just a tiny little bit of softness that would be something like grass, or even the earth is not as hard as a wooden floor, but nothing like a proper mattress or anything of that sort. Now, I kind of already mentioned increased movement. This might not be something you're necessarily looking for when it comes to sleep, but it does benefit you a lot when we're talking about a different type of activity that I've also been doing on the ground a lot, which is working. And most of us nowadays do what when we work? We sit in front of a computer or something comparable, which means, in simpler terms, we are sitting. And when we're sitting, one of the main problems that people have when it comes to posture, when it comes to their knees, their hips, etc., is the fact that they spend a lot of time in one position. And if you look at chairs that are kind of designed to make sitting more comfortable, or even be more healthy, quote unquote, for your back and things like that, they just make sitting more comfortable by making the position you're sitting in while you're on the chair more comfortable, or making it a better position in terms of your the way your back is propped up and things of that nature. But this could actually be seen as both a good and a bad thing. Is it better to sit on a chair that forces you to sit with better posture than a chair that doesn't? Well, yes, maybe. It's better to sit with better posture, sure, but that chair also makes it even more comfortable for you to sit in the same exact position for extended periods of time. What that means is that if you have an especially comfortable office chair or gaming chair, or what have you, you might sit in one single specific position for even longer periods of time than you would have if you had a relatively uncomfortable chair. And sitting on the ground is a great fix for this problem of spending a lot of time in one position, because you really can't. It's kind of hard to sit like this, the way I'm sitting right now, with your legs crossed, with nothing to lean against for extended periods of time. It gets kind of uncomfortable. You will naturally change the position you're sitting in more when you sit on the ground. One, because obviously you're not sitting in something that is designed to make a specific sitting position as comfortable as possible. And two, because the ground itself is hard, right? It doesn't have a nice shape, it doesn't have a cushion or anything. You're just sitting on the ground. Obviously, at some point, this is going to become uncomfortable. Your ass is going to feel like it's like you've sat it flat, if you will, and you're going to want to move a little bit. Maybe sit on your knees. Again, this is something where a yoga mat can come in handy. I don't think you should be forced to kneel on a wooden floor necessarily, but you can absolutely kneel on a slightly soft but generally relatively firm surface. And the nice thing about the floor is not only does it force you to move around more while you're working because it's uncomfortable to sit for extended periods of time, but it also allows you to move around more, to get into more positions because you're on the ground. You have a lot of space. There are a lot of positions you can be in that you couldn't be in if you were on a chair, because a chair kind of restricts you to a very few select ways of sitting on a chair. On the ground, you can kind of lean sideways, propped up on one arm. You can lie down on your stomach, kind of prop your upper body up, which is actually great for a lot of people who spend a lot of time sitting in a more traditional sitting pose. If you look at the way I'm sitting right now, obviously my back is slumped forward a little bit. I'm exaggerating it right now, but even when I'm sitting normally, my back is a little bit bent forward. And when you're lying on the ground and you're lying on your stomach and you kind of tilt your upper body up while looking at a laptop that maybe is in front of you on the ground, you are moving your spine in the opposite direction, which again can be very beneficial for a lot of people who have problems with their back, with posture, things of that nature. So you're forced to move more while you're on the ground, and you also have the ability to move more. You have more space, you have more positions available to you that you can move into. And this is not just going to be great for your posture, it's also just generally going to be good for your mobility and the health of your joints, because sitting in one single position for hours on end isn't exactly great for your knees or your hips either. And it's also great for circulation, because a lot of people who sit a lot, IT guys, I actually know a couple of people who have this specific problem. They actually have problems with circulation, specifically with their feet. And that's something that is definitely going to be improved by spending time on the floor, changing positions a lot, moving around more, not being locked into this kind of default desk position. The next point is something that a lot of people might not consider when thinking about a topic like this. And that is the fact that spending time on the floor changes your perception of the room you're in. Something I personally really liked when I started spending more time on the floor is that I get a change of scenery without moving any furniture around or moving to a new apartment, because I'm spending significant amounts of time in a setting that I haven't really been in. And I think a lot of people know about the benefits of kind of changing up the setting you're working in or you're relaxing in every now and then, to just kind of get into a new mindset, get a kind of fresh perspective on things. And by spending time on the ground, to an extent, you can actually get that without really changing the setting, without changing anything in your apartment, without moving to a different place, going anywhere. You just get a new way of looking at things, a new vibe, essentially, without going anywhere, without doing anything. And even beyond that fact, you get a perspective that you generally wouldn't get even if you went someplace else or changed up things in your apartment. The angle from which you see your furniture, from which you see the room in general, from which you perceive the world, is a very atypical one you're not used to. And in terms of creativity or thinking outside the box, kind of changing your perspective on things in a figurative as well as a literal sense, I think that's a great benefit when it comes to spending time on the floor. This doesn't have to be a specific room or apartment that we're talking about, though. More generally, of course, it changes your perception of all of your surroundings overall, wherever you might be. And this is kind of a segue into the next point. If it's warm enough, if it's dry enough, or if you have something to avoid rainy weather or the cold, doing many of the things I talked about outside, spending time on the ground outside, and maybe not every day, maybe not sleeping outside on the ground every day. That's probably not feasible for a lot of people, but doing some of these things or all of these things, even just sometimes, even just at some point every once in a while, I think is greatly beneficial and can be even better than spending time on the floor inside your apartment or house. I think the whole touch grass meme is to an extent very real. Taking a moment to really consciously touch the ground outside and feel the surface, the texture of grass or the earth or moss, maybe fallen leaves, what have you, and feel the nature of the thing you're touching. Really interact with the ground consciously, even just for a moment. There's something very special about that. It creates a very special feeling inside you, and maybe this connects a little bit or ties into what I talked about in the meditation video that I made in spring when it comes to external meditation and the practice of changing the way you visually and in terms of your hearing, in terms of the way you feel, interact with your surroundings, very consciously perceiving your surroundings. There is a sort of very satisfying, inherently pleasant sensation about touching the ground, in the meme sense, touching grass. But it doesn't have to specifically be grass, just any kind of natural ground surface, and not necessarily even just the ground. This can also be something like tree bark, for instance, but lying on the ground, for instance, feeling the natural ground beneath you as you lie down. I think there's something... God, I thought there was someone walking straight at me. It was just a bat. That kind of jump scared me a little bit. But there is actually someone jogging over there. Anyways, yeah, there's a kind of very special feeling about spending this time on the ground and not just touching it again, and that's what makes the ground special maybe as well, but also lying down on the ground, sitting down on the ground outside, feeling the grass, feeling the little bumps maybe of the earth, things like that, feeling leaves or blades of grass touch against your ears. This sounds kind of esoteric maybe and a little bit weird, but there is something very comforting and very pleasant and very deeply maybe spiritual as well, sure, but also just deeply sort of instinctually real about it, that I think makes it something you should do every once in a while. 100%, even if it might feel kind of stupid at first. Also, if we're talking about more practical, more clean-cut benefits of spending time specifically on the ground outside, the irregular surface of something like a meadow is actually great for lying and sitting, and perhaps even better than just the firm ground, the firm floor that you have inside when we're talking about an apartment or your house, because the irregularity, in addition to the firmness of the ground outside, means that you're getting that massage effect even more. You can kind of move around when you move to a different sitting position or you lie down somewhere new. You're actually getting a slightly different stimulation, a slightly different pressure pattern on your back or side or whatever position you're in. So doing all of the things I talked about outside also has very practical benefits when it comes to this kind of massage aspect. This also extends to working out outside. If we're talking about body weight exercises, for instance, like push ups, the irregularity of the ground is great for those as well. And when I'm talking about the ground outside, I am talking about nature because, of course, when you go outside in a city, there is a lot of very flat, very hard ground that's just stone or asphalt or something of that nature. What I'm talking about is actual nature, so a meadow or the forest ground, something like that. When you do push ups on these slightly uneven surfaces, your hand positioning, your foot positioning will always be a little bit different. You will always do the movement slightly differently. And so you'll get a more holistic stimulation, if you will, as opposed to doing push ups in one fixed position in one specific way when you do them on a flat surface. Obviously, your hand positioning is also going to be slightly different when you do that, but when you're doing them outside, it's going to be slightly irregular, again, based on the irregularity of the ground. There might be a slight imbalance. One hand might be slightly higher than the other. So you just get this three-dimensional aspect to the stimulation of your muscles. I also think there's a lot of benefit to be had from running on uneven ground, running on natural surfaces, and also walking and running on natural surfaces without shoes. I do think there should be a significant amount of time in the year, maybe when you're on vacation, or maybe this is something you can do on the weekend, where you spend time outside on natural surfaces barefoot and not just standing around, but walking around, maybe running around, maybe jumping around. Of course, this is something most people should ease into because a lot of people have very unstable ankles. But generally speaking, if you do this carefully at first and then really get into it, this is greatly going to benefit your ankle stability and just the health of your feet and ankles in general. And I'm going to mention something that might be a little bit controversial, and some people might get offended at me saying this, but I don't actually think you should lift weights wearing shoes. I don't squat, deadlift, or do anything else of that sort wearing shoes. I actually do all of my workouts barefoot. I might, if it's cold, I might wear socks, but I never wear any shoes. More philosophically speaking, I think there should be no such thing as a lifting shoe. Any weight you can't lift because your ankles are too weak, too unstable, is, in my opinion, weight you shouldn't be lifting. Because if your ankles are too weak to, on their own, support the weight you are moving, why are you moving it? Why are your ankles so weak and unstable? That, in my opinion, is a very dysfunctional way of building strength or building muscle. And you should focus on working on your joints, working on your stability, working on your mobility, working on your feet, on your ankles to make sure they are stable and you are standing properly and you can squat a lot of weight or you can deadlift a lot of weight just with your feet, just with your body, without any crutches. Just check the recording. It's still going. That's great. Before I finish this video, there is one last point, and this might seem like a very simple point, a very simple benefit, quote unquote, and it may be something that a lot of people might not even consider when I'm talking about being on the ground, spending time on the ground, on the floor. But in many ways, it is one of, perhaps in some ways, the most important aspect when it comes to this whole topic. And that is the fact that you will have to, and automatically will, maintain the ability to get down on and especially up off the ground. A lot of people, and not even people that are particularly old, we're talking people in their mid, late 20s who work normal jobs, struggle to get on the ground and get up off the ground. And not struggle in the sense that they're not capable of doing it, but struggle in the sense that they might groan and grunt while they do it. They might look kind of wonky doing it, sluggish, like they kind of struggle a little bit to get up off the ground, especially when they've been sitting in the way I am, for instance, for an extended period of time. They might grunt and go like, ugh, and then they get up. And I've caught myself doing this in the past as well. That should not be the case. If you spend a lot of time on the ground, and then obviously you also walk around like a normal human being, you get something to eat from the kitchen, you go somewhere, you meet friends, whatever, you will constantly have to get up and get down on the ground. And that'll improve your mobility, again, your circulation, just the general health of your entire body. Doing this elevation change repeatedly all the time will force you to maintain that ability, again, of getting up and getting down, and doing so in a way that doesn't hurt you, that isn't wonky, that isn't weird. It's going to decrease your chances of seriously getting hurt from something like falling. Like, I personally could never imagine seriously injuring myself when falling to the ground. And this is in part due to my martial arts background and the fact that I did judo as a kid, where you fall a billion times every session. But it is also due to the fact that I've just spent a lot of time changing levels and getting on the ground and getting back up. And just being comfortable with this level change, with this difference in standing and sitting down, makes a huge difference. You're not going to feel like the ground is, of course, just 1.5 or 2 meters, somewhere in between that, beneath you, but actually it feels like it's a billion light years away. You know, people, when they fall down, they are like super scared. Oh no, I might break my wrist or whatever. That's not normal. If you fall, you can kind of slow down your fall. You can go down more smoothly. All of that is something you get more comfortable with when you spend more time on the ground, and thus automatically more time getting onto the ground and getting up off the ground. I think that's going to be it for that point, and also for this video. I don't know how long this is going to be. It actually felt relatively short, but my fingers are kind of freezing up. It's actually pretty fucking cold out. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, if you found this information helpful, interesting, if you just found it entertaining to watch me sit in a dark forest and talk to the camera for however many minutes this video is long, go ahead and leave a like. And if you have any questions about anything I talked about, any information you want to provide on the topic, anything you want to discuss, or you have more general questions, suggestions for the future, something you want me to address in a future video, and go ahead and subscribe if you want to follow me on my carnivore journey. I make videos on fitness, on general health, and on philosophy. So if those are things you are interested in, and who knows, I might make videos on other things as well in the future, go ahead and subscribe and activate the notification bell if you want notifications. I'll see you guys in the next video, and until then, have a good one.